Yo, you're listening to the Story Hacker podcast or watching it. My name is Nick. I am your host. And in this podcast, we are talking about Story Better Part 3, putting it all together.
You're listening to the Story Hacker podcast. We believe a better internal narrative will change your world. Here's your host.
Yo, what's up, fam? Welcome to another Story Hacker podcast where we've been holding it down since 2016. We are all about better stories that lead to brighter futures. My name is Nick, and this framework, the Story Better framework, is really based upon script writing, psychology, narrative psychology, and marketing. The reason for these things is because these are identity shaping factors within our Western culture. And today we're talking about Story Better, putting it all together. And I'm actually really excited for this podcast, so let's hop right into it. One of the things that really marks our society is we live in a nihilistic society. And you might be saying, hey man, like I'm not a nihilist. I practice Buddhism, or I practice meditation and mindfulness, or I'm a Christian, or I'm a Jew, or I'm a Muslim, or you might be saying, hey, like I'm agnostic, but I don't subscribe to nihilism. I think one of the things that has really been brought to my attention is that nihilism isn't something that you subscribe to. It is an action of a society. And so nihilism actually started in France in the mid-century, in the mid-20th century after World War II. A lot of the French philosophers and their writings were very, very dark. It was dark because they were surrounded by war. And this war had literally destroyed the lives that they had known. And them as adults finding themselves within this war-torn rubble, trying to rebuild things, they really started to question what is the meaning of life. And a lot of them came to the conclusion that our existence is a futile existence, or an existence that is made up of not so much meaning, inherent meaning, but it's made up of just the way that we see the world. And so there is some truth to this. The way that we see the world is a lens through our existence. And the way that they saw the world at that current period of time was that life inherently had no meaning. And it was just a small idea. It was some small writings that started to gain massive amounts of traction. And by the time the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s rolled around, it had just been such a thing that consumed the elite understanding of colleges from Harvard all the way to Cambridge. And it was just something that that people started to rest their hat on very, very much so, more than any other time in history. And the reason for this was because it started to resound with people. And so a couple of things that we have to get to the heart of is this is a small group of people that wrote some things that actually had a large impact on society, not knowing that their writings would actually have a large impact on society. And the reason that I bring that up is because the impacts are felt today, and they're really behind the scenes. They're in the zeitgeist. They're not something that you're actively participating in right here and right now because you want to be a nihilist. It is just something that's permeated culture. And as it permeates culture, you don't have much of a say with this. And so that's why it's important to identify these things, so that way the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the world around us can actually change for the better. And so while nihilism was something that allowed people to cope with the stresses of war, once war was gone and we actually went back to a society that actually had, the everyday life, this idea of war-torn mentality actually stuck with us. And so while the writings of the nihilists and the time frame really brought to the forefront, people can be horrible and genocide can happen. And this genocide that happened to the Jewish people has actually been happening to other people groups around the globe for all of existence of mankind. And of course, that will bring up feelings of, man, we feel hopeless. But at the same time, there is a glimmer of hope that can come from understanding that there's a problem. If there's a problem, we can come to the solution. And so one of the first tenets of nihilism that birthed out of France in the mid-century was this idea and this measurement that nihilism is first shown, the first stage is an abandonment of children. And so not only is there an abandonment of children, not investing in children, not caring for children, not having a childlike wonder, not having a sense of play, these are very, very important things for the maturation of children. And so one thing that happened was the inherent state of children being able to play, being able to express themselves, to be artists, one thing that we started to incorporate in America was education, and the education system was actually there to create these factory workers essentially from children. And so a lot of the creativity, a lot of the divergent ideas of value actually got squashed within children. So much so that when you measure children to in kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, the creativity slope actually takes a nosedive. We've been taught that there's only one right answer, and that's not true. There's multiple right answers. And the reason that I say that is because math, while it does have a right answer, society is complex. And so you don't necessarily just have one equation for society. You have multiple things happening. So anthropologically, there are many more solutions. But because we have been trained to be a factory worker, to put the widget together that's coming down the line that's in front of you, you have to focus on one discipline. While multidisciplinary people inherently know this, entrepreneurs know this, that you can take a lot of disciplines, put it together, and create something new and something exciting. That's not taught within our current education system. So there is an education system that has abandoned children. There is a society that has abandoned children. One of the people groups that I find most interesting is called the Dinks, the double income, no kids. And that whole lifestyle is really about maximizing pleasure and maximizing adult enjoyment within the confines of marriage, I guess. And so I'm not trying to vilify the double income, no kids. That's their choice. Feel free to do whatever you want to do. This is your life. Definitely live it. But I will say that within that mentality, there is no solution for children's education. There is no solution for the betterment of children in any way, shape, or form. And so while you think about that, there's a crisis when it comes to not only homeless children, but children that are within the foster and adopt system. Like that's in a mess of itself. And so there is a blatant saying, like, we are not going to focus on kids within our society. And you might be a parent today. And you might be trying your best, you might be struggling. But the truth of the matter is our society really likes technology more. We like the screen time more. We like senses of pleasure more. We like we like things that allow us to be filled with our own self-interest. And so children actually require a lot of sacrifice. And so what you're seeing is the first step of a nihilistic society is to say, hey, we actually disregard children. And because we disregard children, that leads us to the next phase of a society that is living in nihilism. The second phase of a nihilistic society is going to be the abandonment of self. So if you were taught as a child that your feelings didn't matter, if you were put second, if you were not nurtured, if you were not cared for, if you were not fed, if you were not loved in the way that your body required, as you get older, you start to realize that you're going to live that pattern as an adult. So you will not take care of your health. You will not take care of your own personal needs, your own internal world, like your emotional needs. Those things will be put on the back burner. And because our society is so hyper-focused on work and capitalism and this idea of the factory worker, what's going to really, and all tell signs point to income. And so you're going to do the most that you can with income because you've been given this promise that if you make enough money, if you have healthcare, if you have all the benefits, if you have all of these things, you're going to be happy. And that's not necessarily true. Scientists and psychologists, Dr. Stuart Brown actually found that play is one of the precursors to learning. And what I love about Dr. Stuart Brown and other people in this space, like Jane McGonigal from what was her thing called? I think she had, I have to look it up, but Jane McGonigal had a brilliant book around some of the ways that brain science work. Let me look that up real fast because I think citing her work is one of the things that I found most helpful is, the gamification of life. And so some of her books were just phenomenal. And I'll give you two of those books right now. I'm looking it up on the internet as we speak. Super Better was a revolutionary approach to getting stronger, happier, braver, and more resilient. Her story is a great story in of itself. So you have like a Jane McGonigal, you have a Dr. Stuart Brown, you have these scientists, psychologists doctors who are telling you play is at the heart of, us learning and us being better and us getting more skills. And we've just abandoned our children, and we've abandoned the play of children. And so when you get into adulthood, you actually believe that play is something for children. And while play is actually at the core of who we are when it comes to learning as human individuals. And so you've abandoned yourself to a certain extent if you're not eating lunch, if during work, because there's so much work to do. There is this hurry that is deeply wound within our society. And it's so easy to abandon yourself, to not look at your own needs, to not take the time to do and slow down and to just be. There is an actual assault on your central nervous system by our current society. And that leads to the third abandonment of nihilism. So if you're tracking with me, hopefully you are tracking with me, you're starting to see that the way that we treat our children as a society, the way that we treat ourselves as a society, and the way that we treat community as a society is a telltale sign. In the seminal book, Bowling Alone, which recently got an update for its 20th year anniversary, started to show the decline of almost every communal aspect in America, from bowling leagues to any community Rotary Club to anything you can think of, from religions. Everything started to be abandoned in this idea of let's be more political. And so this also happened with Reagan, and there's a lot of things that we could go into in Reaganomics and things of that nature. But the truth of the matter is, as a society from the 1960s, there has just been a decline of this idea of we are better together. It's actually more of a hyper-individualistic society. So if you're abandoned as a child, if you don't care for yourself, you're not going to care for the community. And so you can start to see that the people who are currently in their 80s actually have a higher happiness rating than people in their 50s and 60s. And same thing as you start to trickle all the way down to high schoolers, they have some of the lowest scores when it comes to happiness. So much so, a study was done, and it is in the book Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Cal Newport's book was phenomenal because he cited some high school and college students having massive amounts of depression. And they were spending up to 8 hours on their phone per day. And the counselors are like, just stay off your phone less. And because these kids were so desperate, they said, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And they started to live a more digital, minimalistic life. And they started to see their happiness levels rise. And so we can see a correlation that the hyper-individualistic society that we live in, that is really you first. It is about technology. It is about crafting an image, a narrative, which we would call like your own personal branding, so to speak. That is doing detriment to our communities, from bowling leagues to chess groups, all the way down to your local synagogue and church. And because we've abandoned the idea of neighborhoods, of our neighbor, we don't care for our neighbor. We're not going out of the way for, our next door neighbor, let alone knowing their own name. And so if you're abandoning your neighbor because you've abandoned yourself and you've been abandoned as a child, it comes to this final abandonment. And this is a cosmic abandonment, meaning we believe the cosmos, we believe God has abandoned us. And so Nietzsche, he said it in his, God is dead. And when he said that, he wasn't making a statement, but he was going to the fact of nihilism. Like he was actually seeing how nihilism was going to a certain extent, if it had its day in the sun, was going to destroy societies. And while our society is still maintaining itself, it is still going, the core, what I would consider the relational fabric of our society has been unwound and undermined by so many different points of our existence that we have to ask ourselves, why aren't we happy? And I believe fundamentally it's because we all subscribe to this nihilism. And so there are a couple of key things that Story Better does to address this nihilism. The first thing that Story Better does is it asks you to steward your story well. And one thing that I have found when you start to take into consideration your life's journey, when you get to a certain stage in life, you start to realize that you are made for community. And as you're made for community, you're meant to solve problems for other people. This is the hero's journey. The hero in the typical journey is a little self-centered, is focused internally. What I love about author David Brooks in his book, The Second Mountain, is he identifies this with all of humanity. And once you hit the midpoint of life, once you hit your 2,000 weeks, you start to think differently about the world around you. You want to make a contribution and help. But if you're so ingrained in the abandonments of nihilism, you're going to believe that your contribution doesn't matter. But the truth of the matter is it absolutely does. What I found most fascinating is that athletes are the ones who are giving back more out of a large part of society. A lot of athletes have their own nonprofits. They have their own ways of trying to make the sport of their choice more centered in schools and in communities. And the reason for this is not because athletes are more intelligent or athletes have, well, they do have more money, but it's not because inherently all athletes are rich. It's because athletes have moved their body, and the movement of the body has produced dopamine within the brain. And it also has had this idea of teamwork, that there has been a community that has been built into athletics. There's been a community that's built into inherently some of the things that, that are happening within the sport. And what I've started to realize is that community based around physical activity starts to bring and generate a level of happiness. That's why run clubs are on the rise. That's why Peloton and SoulCycle and this idea of high intensity training workouts, those CrossFit gyms, why we're just seeing an explosion of these pocketed communities. It's because people are feeling seen, known, and heard when it comes to this physical activity, which is producing dopamine, which is actually making their body stronger. It's actually calming down their central nervous system. And they're in this place of like, hey, like I feel so much better. I'm starting to look better. I'm starting to gain this confidence. And I'm doing it with other people. And I feel like these people care to a certain extent about me. And I think it is so important, to really think through those aspects, and not only to think through those aspects, but to employ those aspects within our own life is community, moving the body, and then the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. I've created something to help you do just this. It's called Story Mode 90. And so Story Mode 90 is taking the next 90 days and really taking the Story Better framework and applying it to your life on a daily basis. I've been doing this for almost a whole year now. And what I've been doing is I've tried to get two workouts in a day. And so what that means is I'll probably spend some time either running in the morning or running in the evening, but then I'll supplement those others with body movement. And some body movements that I've been doing, like every podcast that I talk about, high intensity interval training, those CrossFit weightlifting, that type of thing. There's something new that I found that I've really started to enjoy, and it's a flow rope. Essentially, it's like these, the workout ropes that you would use within CrossFit, but they're a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. And the whole point is like this kind of almost EMDR, moving side to side, having the brain-hand boundary being crossed as you move this rope back and forth. I found that to be really fascinating and actually help a bit like calming wise, like being a lot more calm after that. It's not super intense by any way, shape, or form, but it is something that is going to help. And so you might say, hey, Nick, why don't I just join a gym? Definitely join a gym, but you have to surround yourself with community, and people is very, very important. That's why in the last podcast, I did talk about synagogues, mosques, and churches that you could go to, local libraries, because community does matter. Moving your body matters. Community matters. And I think one of the best things that we could do is to really play, start to develop this idea of play. And that's what the Story Better framework is here to do. It's here to help you cultivate a sense of play. And what is your hero's journey? What is the story that you tell yourself about yourself and the world around you? What is something that you want to experiment with and try something that's new? What this does is this creates new neural pathways in our brain when we start to say, hey, you know what I've never done before? I've never made anything out of clay. Like a pottery class might be cool. Or I've never painted with paint actually, or went and spray painted something, or even built something with my hands. That would be very, very interesting. Or I've never learned chess, or I've never thought about, playing Mario Kart online with friends. Maybe you're the kind of person who doesn't even play video games. What I'm trying to get at here is when you start to do something new, your mind opens up. And these tenets of nihilism start to slowly fade. And what you do, like David Brooks talks about in The Second Mountain, is you start to care for the people around you. And not only do you start to care for the people around you, Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, he calls it this. He says it's bringing back the elixir, finding the thing that has helped you so tremendously and bringing that to other people. I used to work for a organization called Community Bible Church. I was onlinechurch.com, social media manager. And at the time, the church itself was focused on community groups. And these were groups that were affinity groups. You rallied around the thing that you liked. So there was people who were doing CrossFit. There was people who were doing board games, tabletop games. And there was people who were, just getting together based upon age group. But one of the ministries that I found super fascinating was, it was like a crocheting, knitting ministry. And what they would do is they would make blankets and scarves and hats for cancer patients. And what was really, really interesting was around this time, my mom had just gone through breast cancer, and she came out on the other side. You know, breast cancer was one of those cancers that's really, really easy to beat. And so she was, it almost felt like 3 fast years, but has been healthy ever since then. And that's been a couple of decades ago. And the reason that I highlight this is because they found a tight-knit sense of community around crocheting and knitting. And so it really doesn't matter what it is that you rally around. What matters most is that you gather. And so I find that gathering is really, really important. It is substantial to the way that we need to operate and the way that we need to be. And so all those things, are there for you. You can go to storybetter.co. You can download the Storybetter 90 framework. It is loosely based off of like 75 hard, but this is story mode. This is not here to like make you ripped. This is not here to make you like super jacked and, super swole or anything like that. But the idea is to nurture your mind. There is a list of books for you to check out that will help with the narrative sense. There's some exercises there that are, there to help you kind of determine what's going to be most fun for you. And there's some dietary things also in the document that just allow you to peruse, like what would it look like to intake less sugar, maybe intake more protein, whether that's plant-based protein, or just to diversify your diet, because gut biome actually is really, really part of your total body. And so that's really important, is to take care of yourself from the idea of play all the way to, your brain body experience. That's listed at storybetter.co. Go download that, check that out. I think it is going to be something that's going to help a lot of people. The final thing that I will say is the hope is you in your current context can make a difference. You just have to be brave enough to say, hey, I am willing to step out and to start to organize a couple of things, whether that's a run club, organizing the thing that you think is going to be best for you, your current context, your current community, and then starting to build community around things that make you healthy, which is healthy food, healthy friendships, and healthy thinking. And so, storybetter.co, go check it out. One announcement I would like to make to you, to the Story Hacker community, is that this podcast is actually changing its name from Story Hacker to Story Better. And the reason for that is because a lot of what initially started was just like these hacks that would get you to a place where it's like, listening to, music while working, and also having the, I forget the term of it, but it's where you have these two frequencies, the binaural beats. When you have two different binaural beats going, like you focus more, or just those types of things. While these things started out being puzzle pieces, and I thought they were individualistic, like, here's a hack here, here's a hack there. What I started to realize is that hacking life is not a good thing. And the reason for that hacking life is not a good thing is because it doesn't fundamentally address what's at the core, when Story Better does. So Story Hacker going away, it's probably going to take me about a year to really remove that from the vocabulary. I actually do have the Story Hacker's Handbook. That's almost done. That is still going to come out as the Story Hacker's Handbook, but next iteration of where we're going is Story Better. Go download that, storybetter.co, just to get a taste of what Story Better framework is going to start to look like for you, your life, your community, and your relationships. And so, that is the turning point. We have gotten through all 3 Story Better podcasts. It's taken us a year. but I am super excited to get through this. If you have any questions for me, you can reach out on any of the social medias at Nick_Ovalle. And until we chat again, I hope you tell the world a great story. Peace.